There are 4 things that we should know about payroll. The first one is, what is payroll? So payroll is the payment pace, concerned with managing the compensation of employee for services rendered. It's one that probably occupies the most attention since the propriety and accuracy of all payroll payments. All payroll payments will have a direct impact on the fair presentation of financial reports. The second thing that we should know about payroll is objective of payroll. There is actually 4 objectives of payroll. The first one is to verify the rate of pay on each employee's pay distribution. The second one is to verify time cards, payroll reporting system, and the paycheck. The third one is to establish ongoing compliance for and record keeping. And the last one is to confirm that all cancelled checks are accurate and match with what was issued. So the third one is objective of payroll audit. Objective of payroll audit is to verify current employment status of employees. And the last one is objective of payroll and personnel cycle. Objective of payroll and personnel cycle is to evaluate whether the account affected by the cycle are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles.
Next is payroll cycle.
The first one is authorizing employment by recruited new employees. They have to fill up the form such as personal data form, form of the employment eligibility verifications, benefit form include health, dental and others, and retirement plan forms. Timekeeping. The first thing is collecting time card information. Employee required no change in wages paid for each payroll, but an employer must collect and interpret information about hours worked for non-exempt employee, for example, punch card. The second step is verifying time card information. Payroll staff must summarize the information and verify that employee have recorded the correct amount of time. Next is preparation of payroll. Preparation of payroll can be divided into a few steps. The first step is summarizing wages due. The wages include the overtime of employee work, bonus, shift differential and others. Second, keying employee changes. If employees have changes in their paychecks, its information must be recorded for payroll processing purpose, since it may alter the amount of taxes and other type of deductions. Third, calculating applicable taxes. 4. Calculating applicable wage deductions by voluntary deduction and involuntary deductions. For voluntary deduction, it includes payment into pension and medical plans, while for involuntary deduction, it includes the garnishment and union dues. 5. Creating payroll registers by summarize the wage and deduction information for each employee of a payroll registers. 6. Verify wage and tax amount by conduct a final cross-check of all wage calculation and deductions. 7. Keying payroll information in a general ledgers by use the information in a payroll register to compile a journal entry to general ledgers. And 8. Sending out direct deposit notifications. The company arranged with a local bank to issue payment directly to employee accounts. And the last one is payment of payroll. First, depositing withheld taxes. Employer must deposit all related payroll tax deduction and employer match taxes at a local authorized bank. Second, issuing paychecks handed out directly to employees with proof of identifications. And third, issuing government payroll report. The government requires general payroll-related report at regulars.
As you can see, these are the main accounts and transactions related to payroll. Next are documents and records related to payroll processing. For your information, there are 10 documents and activities related to payroll transactions. So, the first document that I will explain is personal file. Let me explain to you what personal file is. Personal file is a document that records an employee's data. Basically, semua records yang ada dalam data ni is related to employees, including details of date of employment, rates of wages and salaries, authorized deductions, evaluations, and termination of employment. Next, What is the purpose of personnel file? Why are they related to payroll transactions? Okay, first of all, it will help the manager to supply crucial information regarding the employees. Macam saya cakap tadi, data yang disimpan salah satunya adalah date of the employment. Dalam date of the employment juga, ada simpan applicants past records, ada simpan employees progress. So daripada situ, managers boleh tahu update tentang employees mereka sendiri. Next, benda ni juga akan tolong managers to make salary revisions, allowance and other benefits related to salaries. Sebab apa? Sebab wages and salary records yang kita simpan tadi, dia mengandungi payroll records, methods of wages and salaries, leave records, turnover records and other benefit records. Daripada situ, memang dah cukup information untuk manager untuk buat salary revision, untuk mempermudahkan kerja manager. It will also help the researchers to carry in-depth study with respect to industrial relations and goodwill of the firm in the market. Therefore, personnel files are really vital for an organization and are not a wasteful exercise. Next is the rate authorization form. It authorizes rate of pay. Authorization rate also determines how many of the total number of transactions were successful. Authorizing a transaction ni is basically a step in the payment flow where duit kita are being held in a bank account until the payment is confirmed. Bila payment dah confirm, barulah credit card kita is actually charged. Next, we will move to the second document or record, which is deduction authorization form. Deduction authorization form authorizes payroll deductions for EPF contribution and superannuation. So, to make you guys understand, it is a report of all taxes, withholdings, insurance payments and contributions issued by the company for every employee. Ada dua payroll deductions which is mandatory and voluntary. Sebagai contoh yang saya boleh sertakan sebagai payroll deductions is federal, state and local taxes, health insurance premiums and job-related expenses. Okay, I will now explain about mandatory payroll deductions. Mandatory payroll deductions ni mostly involves cukai. So employers are required to withhold payroll taxes from employee wages and submit them to tax agencies. Failure untuk bayar payroll taxes can lead to penalisation. Other mandatory payroll deductions is Federal Insurance Contribution Act, or known as FICA tax, federal income tax, state and local taxes and garnishments. Next, kita akan cakap tentang voluntary payroll deductions pula. Okay, kalau mandatory payroll deductions tadi kita kena withhold extra money, voluntary pula kita kena require employee consent sebab kita nak participate in different benefits. So employee kena tahu, kena ambil kisah tentang hal ni. Jadi kita kena minta consent dia. Examples for voluntary payroll deductions is health insurance premiums, retirement plans, life insurance premiums, job-related expenses. But all of this requires a form. So kalau tak ada form, then this would be meaningless. So how should you fill out the payroll deduction form? So there are few recommendations that you should follow, which is first, you should include your name and the number of the employee, the job position. Second, you kena letak date that the withholding was made. And then third, you kena mention department mana your employer is assigned to. Fourth, you include any other information about the employee needed for the transaction. Fifth, you kena nyatakan apa type of withdrawal you, and then you kena bagi tahu reason kenapa certain amount of money has to be deducted. Six, you kena include state and local tax payment details. And lastly, hired person tu kena certify the document with a signature, and then kena letak tarikh when the document was signed. The last one I'll be explaining about is time card. Okay, what is time card? Time card is also called a timesheet. It helps to record the time employee starts and stops work during a pay period. Card ni kena inserted into a time clock as an employee commences or ceases work, and the time will automatically be punched onto the card. Bak kata orang Melayu, punch card. Kalau selalunya orang Melayu, kita akan punch card pada waktu pagi pukul 9 pagi. Dan kita akan punch card balik pada pukul 5 petang. Time card, that is how it works. It's basically a document or a program that tracks the number of hours you work, either in 1 week or on a particular project. In other words, macam it is a record that you can look back on to find out how much time you spent doing something. Time card ni pun bagus kalau kita guna untuk record task yang kita nak buat, sebab it may contain a detailed breakdown of tasks accomplished by the individuals who worked on that task. Time card ni can also be used to build a body of knowledge about how many effort tasks take to develop. Sebagai contoh, if let's say kita develop a training plan has historically taken a month, then kita boleh assume that creating a new one will also take a month. Time card ni is a great asset in project management. Selalunya dekat time card, it has your name on it, and when you arrived at your workplace, you need to put your time card inside the timer box, and then it will punch your card at the time you put it inside the box. This is also the same for the time card time you nak balik kerja nanti.
Next, we will move on to another document, which is payroll check. Payroll check is a piece of paper that your employer gives you as your wages or salary, and which you can then cash at the bank. You can also use paycheck as a way of referring to your wages or salary. The activity of payroll check is to prepare a check in the name of the employee for services rendered. This overcomes the problem of cash handling, which can be by time consuming and provide greater control because the check box can be used as a proof of payment. Next, Payroll Register, also known as pay sheet or wages sheet. Payroll Register is a hard copy or electronic spreadsheet listing important employee payroll information for specific payroll period. A payroll register helps employers keep track of employee payroll information conveniently. It basically provides a summary of payroll data, serving as a reference record and a tool to assist with a number of payroll tax-related tasks. Some of the information listed by the payroll for each payroll period, including total wage, gross pay, total deduction, and total net pay. The activity of payroll register is to record the detail of each employee pay, the amount of gross pay, and how it is computed, the amount of deduction, and the amount of the net pay for each pay period. This register serves as a summary of the amount paid to employee during each day period. Next, employee earning record. An employee earning record is the record that details an employee payroll history. Employee earning report or pay stub are usually attached to employee paycheck. This report often have columns totally how many employee hours were worked, their net pay, gross pay, deduction from payroll, and other year-to-date payroll information. The activity is to record the detail of an employee pay for the whole financial year. Pay details are entered on the card for each pay period. The preparation of employee group certificates is made easier by totaling the column of the card instead of having to prepare to the payroll register for each pay period to verify how much each employee has been paid.
Labor Cost Distribution Summary. Preparing a summary identifying the gross factory earnings for the various account classification. In the summary, it will be included for hours worked, wages earned, and benefits accrued by an employee. By record all of the data, It will help the management to analyze the labor cost in the factory by each division and how much for them to pay the labor. Payroll tax return prepares tax forms for submission to the relevant government agency. Untuk payroll tax return ni, dia untuk menyatakan berapa cukai yang perlu kita bayar berdasarkan gaji yang kita akan dapat. Yearly remuneration statement. The document need to be prepared for an employee to filing with Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia. In the document, it need to be with showing annual earnings, EPF contribution withheld, and other deduction authorized by the employee, including zakat payment and union dues. Last but not least in the document, it needs a control card. Prepares a control card showing the total payroll for the period. At the end of each pay period, the employee earning records are total and will be reconciled with the control card. This is to control and measure the similar to that of the control account.
Next, we move to internal control objective and control procedure of payroll. Payroll internal control objective consists of 5 assertions, which are occurrence, completeness, accuracy, cut-off, and classification. Firstly, occurrence. Occurrence, this means that all payroll transactions are recorded for services. The payment for payroll-related service are being made to the valid employee for actual time work. The auditor is going to do a search of this employee, for example, getting a sample of employee and identify that this employee are actual there or actual working and are actual person. This is to ensure that no payment are made to fictitious employee and payment to ex-employee are stopped once the employee has left the company. Besides that, there must be proper segregation of duty between processing and personnel functions. Adequate personnel files are maintained and work or time record are approved by person of appropriate level. Secondly, completeness. This means that all payroll transactions are properly recorded. Updated record for status and leavers should be maintained by personnel office, and payroll processing function is provided with updated information about leavers. The auditor will check the numerical sequence of time or work records and the reconciliation of payroll summary and status and leavers recorded in the personnel records. Thirdly, accuracy. This means that payroll transactions are recorded at the proper amount. There should be internal verification to ensure that the calculation of wages and salaries is in agreement with record of work performed and terms of employment. The auditor will examine the client's records to see whether the client has checked the arithmetical accuracy of employee benefit costs to ensure the amount are in accordance with employment contracts. Next, cut-off. This means that payroll transactions are recorded in the correct accounting period. Notice of addition, termination, changes in pay rates, and deduction reported promptly to payroll processing function. The auditor will examine the indication of internal control verification and test procedure for processing time or work record and for recording liabilities. Lastly, classification. This means that payroll transactions are recorded in the proper account. Proper internal verification and approval for account charged to payroll. The auditor will review client procedure and inspect their record to verify there has been proper classification of employee benefit costs.
After obtaining an understanding of the internal control structure to plan the payroll and personnel cycle audit, the auditor will make a preliminary assessment of control risk for the financial report assertions related to the cycle, transaction and account balances. It is also to evaluate the effectiveness of an entity's internal control structure in preventing and correcting material misstatements. The use of flow charts and internal control questionnaires is to document the auditor understanding of the internal control structure and also assessment control risk. There are 4 types of test control, which are observation, inquiry, and inspection and reperformance. Observation is the process of looking at the procedures that are being performed by the client. This process is to make sure the internal control exists and the procedures are as described. Inquiry is the process of asking for an explanation from the client relating to the control process or transactions. Inspection is the process of examination of supporting documents related to control procedures. For example, we may inspect the bank reconciliation report to make sure it exists and the procedures are as described. Reperformance is the process of auditors reperforming the control procedures that were performed by the client. Reperformance is the most reliable type of test of controls, and it provides better assurance compared to other types. Audit tests are designed to meet the control objective and related assertion. Auditor will test occurrence assertion to ensure that all recorded payroll transactions have taken place. Completeness assertion is to ensure all payroll transactions are processed and recorded. Accuracy, cut-off, and classification is to ensure all payroll transactions are recorded at their proper amounts in the proper accounting period and proper accounts. For the review of preliminary assessment of control risk, we have 2 conditions based on the test of control. The first condition is if the audit evidence are a result of control failure, the auditor will need to modify the nature, timing, and extent of planned substantive procedures to be performed. As a result, the assessed level of control risk should be increased for those report assertions to which they are related to. The second condition is if the audit evidence indicates that the control policies and procedures are operating effectively, the assessed level of control risk may be lowered. Therefore, the substantive test may be reduced accordingly. Substantive audit procedures for payroll are made up of substantive tests of payroll transaction and substantive tests of payroll balances, including analytical review of procedures. Substantive tests of payroll transactions are performed if a review of the preliminary assessment of control risk is high, and it is quite common for auditors to perform some substantive tests of payroll transactions at the same time as tests of control. Some of the tests of payroll transactions are obtain control of payroll sheets and observe the distribution of paychecks. Second is prepare a reconciliation of payroll bank statement with Payroll Register payments and recalculate the gross pay, net pay, and payroll deductions for a sample of employees. For substantive tests of payroll balances, it is an audit procedure that examines the financial statement and supporting document if there is an error. These tests are needed as evidence to support the assertion that the financial report of the entity are complete, valid, and accurate. Substantive tests of payroll balances review the payroll account for the date that payroll was last paid and recalculate accrued wages. Second is trace total accrued payroll to payroll records and perform analytical procedures.
Payroll audit procedures. First, look at the employees listed on company's payroll. Review and verify employees listed on payroll. Make sure that the list of employees on payroll match with employment records. Remove any employees who no longer work for the company. The company may need to dig deeper to find out why those employees are still on the payroll. Second, analyze numbers. Examine each employee's pay rate to ensure the worker was paid with the right amount. Make sure the pay rate is up to date and matched with employee's record. If the company gave the employee a raise or salary reduction, verify that the company has changed the pay rate on the applicable date. Look into the hours employee work. Did they really work those hours during the pay period? Third, verify time is correctly labeled. Most employers give employees time off from work, with many providing paid time off. If a company provides time off, they have to make sure that the person in charge or the employee itself properly label time when running payroll. That way, the company can easily identify when an employee worked and when they didn't. Be sure to label time off as vacation, personal, sick, or whatever label the company use. Next, reconcile payroll. Compare findings to other records to verify total match. If there is a discrepancy, closely examine records to find out the problem. Compare payroll records to business general ledger. The payroll expenses in general ledger should match payroll audit findings. Reconcile payroll records with bank statement. Compare the amount listed in payroll records to what was withdrawn from account. Lastly, confirm tax withholdings, remittance, and reports are accurate. The company has to make sure that they withheld the correct amount of taxes from each employee's wages. They must withhold federal income, social security, and Medicare taxes. They may also need to withhold state and local income tax. Verify that remitted tax amounts are correct. Compare the value on payroll reports to payroll records. Wages and tax withholdings amount listed on payroll reports should match payroll records.
Before we end our video, here is an example on how to answer payroll question in the final examination. Dekat sini ada paper Januari 2018 dan biasanya soalan payroll ni dia akan ditanya pada soalan yang terakhir iaitu question 5. Soalan ni juga dia bawa 20 markah. Untuk question 5 ni dia akan pecah kepada dua iaitu soalan A dan soalan B. Untuk soalan A berjumlah 5 markah dan soalan B pula berjumlah 15 markah. Jadi untuk yang A dia minta identify any two internal control objectives related to payroll and personal cycle. 2 markah. So seperti yang kita dah belajar, internal control objective ada 5 iaitu completeness, timing or cut off, classification, occurrence dan accuracy. Jadi sebabkan dia 2 markah saja, tak perlu explanation, terus je letak point dia. Jadi boleh pilih antara 5 tu, pilih 2 sahaja. Next is determine any two common tests of controls to identify any significant deficiencies and weaknesses of client's payroll system. 3 markah. Boleh letak any possible answer, but antara jawapan contohnya adalah first, examine time records for indication of approvals. Second, review human resources policies. Third, examine the procedures manual and observe when recording takes place. Fourth, account for a sequence of payroll checks. And last kali, examine procedures manual and observe when recording takes place. Jadi boleh pilih 2 saja antara jawapan yang diberi. Next, untuk soalan B pula, dia akan bagi situation dan dia juga akan minta 3 benda iaitu weaknesses, possible effect dan recommendation bagi situasi yang telah diberi. Untuk setiap yang diminta, dia akan minta 5. Jadi, jumlah markah bagi soalan ini adalah 15 markah. Soalan B ni, dia akan minta kita untuk jawab dalam bentuk table. So, bagikan kepada 3 kolom, iaitu kolom pertama weaknesses, kolom kedua possible effect dan kolom ketiga adalah recommendation. Jadi, ini adalah jawapan untuk soalan B tadi, iaitu weaknesses, possible effect dan juga recommendation. In conclusion, it is important for a company to do audit payroll rightfully to make sure the wages paid to employees has no problem and fraud. Thank you.